You were just fucking with him, you pricks. You didn't need to do that to him. You just you got sick of being one-upped by someone that was much younger than you, that was much smarter than you. And the reason is, like, you're not normal, so fucking stop being a dick.
I came out as a plant, which presents new ideas and approaches.
The names don't even match.
How could you? That's not attractive to describe, though.
Yeah.
Like, how did they get people? Did this scale?
Well, a lot of people use it.
The book was like the book
who's
they wrote
an
was
example
quite.
of a company that uses it?
I don't know about companies.
Who uses it then?
Well, I did in my MBA.
Oh, so university uses it.
Yeah.
In an MBA.
Yes.
Right.
Told ya.
That's why it's working. The guy joined a cult.
Go above 100. Like it's like.
Yeah, he joined a cult and then lived in India for 6 months.
He literally said to people like, "You will have this closed system that you can't play with in your house."
Well,
You got your bib in your bag?
I never played netball. We used to be in a team.
I did.
The Commonwealth Bank team?
Yeah, nothing but net bank. G'day everyone, welcome to Psy-Find, where we find out some interesting things about some interesting people and delve into psychology. Tom, how you doing?
Morning. Good. I feel like I'm wearing the same thing that I wore last podcast, and that's going to look weird when we publish.
I don't have any other clothes.
I'll wear the same shirt every day. I think it'll work.
I honestly don't have any other
Something
clothes.
You went your...
Symbols in uniform.
I'm in a running shirt.
Tom
Are they
Larter-
running shirts?
Tom Larter when he's like skivvy though.
It's not a skivvy. But we are talking about jobs, so I thought I'd get in character.
We do have an interesting one today, talking about Meredith Belbin. Belbin teams. You want to tell us a little bit about it, Tom?
First of all, it's a guy.
Meredith.
After we
Male
talk-
Meredith.
Male Meredith. Interesting guy and interesting research. He created his, I guess, version of how teams function well. And he basically said that based on interpersonal reactions and your persona types and temperament, you fulfill a certain role naturally in any team. And he has 9 different roles that we'll probably talk about through here that he goes through that align roughly with, our archetypes of doer, creative, and translator. And he kind of breaks it into 9 about you're the innovator, you're the connector, you're the, I think he calls it plant, and there's all these different roles. And really it boiled down to the fact that based on your natural state, you will fall into that natural role in a team, and that's the function that you will fulfill. One of the things I found really interesting is how he thinks smaller teams are better. And there's an interesting thing that he talks about between the psychology of groups and the psychology of teams, a team being about 4 and a group being, 6 or above. But the fact that he liked even numbers because odd numbers creates a natural hierarchy where the odd person is, whoever the odd person ends up being is like the veto voter that ends up having this level of power in the team that just happens naturally, which I found interesting. But yeah, I think we'll go through all 9, I guess, in this podcast. But I think there's some merit in what he's talking about in terms of the roles people play. But what I didn't like was it never really digs into the detail of how to leverage that to make the team high performing. He's just kind of like, be aware of it, and that's how the team functions well.
And I also didn't read much about how you form a good team around these roles.
Yeah. I don't know. He could be really, really creative and be right, or have a pseudo-psychological, sociological view on something and was a bored academic.
Yeah, like I think he's one of these dudes who just liked watching people.
What do you think?
I think his research would have been far more improved if he'd
Well,
wanted to make high-performing teams.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about the guy for a second, he's a pretty boring guy.
Yeah.
First of all, his name's going to give him heaps of shit. Like, seriously, like this sort of stuff has an effect on people.
Yeah.
I don't know any strong Nigels, to be honest. It's interesting that he never had a real job. He pretty much was an academic from woe to go, which is really interesting. The other thing is his undergraduate's in the classics, which means he's probably super creative and alternative. Or maybe just super boring because the classics were pretty standardized at the time. What?
It just reeks of university management. Like
does.
going and doing like studying.
It
management.
does, but then it has anthropology and anthropologists linked into it. So the sort of questions I think you should think about as you're taking a run through the model is whether it's a super creative idea from a team of people that actually just spent their whole lives watching, which it might be. Not all the gangster rappers were gangsters. Think about it.
Yeah.
One of the best rappers really wasn't. Or is it just rolling through the journey and then getting to your last 30 years and realizing that you can sell your academia to willing people looking to buy it? And it comes back to that problem that why would something like this scale? It either scales because it's right.
Or it's simple.
Or somewhat, but just go a little bit deeper because you're deeper than that, Tom. People are always trying to figure out where they fit in the world, and this might be a nice way of doing it.
Look, I think that's fair. I agree. That is deeper.
Like, no one ever goes into a team and goes, hey, I said this to one of the people here this week. I'm like, well, you've got to get all these tasks done. Who's your best planner? I never thought about it that way. Treating everyone with the same strengths and talents. It might be a rudimentary way of analysing people's aptitude, strength, and putting them in the right spot with the right task. I don't know.
It might give people a safety blanket as well. Like, that's my role.
Well,
I just do my thing, and that contributes. I know that contributes to the team.
Well, it's like netball, right?
Yeah.
It's like one of those sports where you can't score. Everyone can't score, which makes it...
Play your role.
Well, correct. Play a role, right? But no one... Now you can't score. Now there's somewhat some power in the structure of the game being structured that way. It makes it more challenging. It increases complexity when things could be running around just like basketball. So it stops being about power and starts being a little bit more about tactics. One of the things that's interesting though is that the only person everyone hates in the whole team is like wing defense. Well, everyone else has got. I'm the goal attack.
Yeah.
Which is the fucking hot shit position, by the way. I used to be a goal attack. And
you probably would have been a better wing defense.
no, I used to line back like a good goal attack. What are you talking about? Look at the size of my arms, man. I could shoot. I was ambitious.
You can't
I was
catch
fitness.
things.
I was very good at sport. Which I'm not good at things now, but I was very good at sport.
You didn't know Tom before his body was broken.
Yeah,
He was
that's
actually
true.
quite athletic.
Yeah. That sucks.
Yeah. It's like being in a
So
prison.
so that's a
So
good
the point
it's a
I'm
good
trying to make
analogy
is-
about
But here's
netball.
the point I'm trying to make with this sport. It provided structure to the game which made it more complex. So then alternative, rather than if you think of different speeds, it changed the speed but increasing the complexity and made it harder to play. Whereas basketball, it's just become about strength, somewhat, right? It's like rugby league versus rugby union. You still have to play some sort of tactical game in rugby union as well as have the strength. Now, when you play the sport, though, people really, really, really identify with that position.
Yeah. They're fucking defensive about it.
Super defensive.
Yeah.
But there's friendships made over it.
Yeah.
So,
all the goal attacks hang out together.
well, exactly.
Yeah. The quarterbacks.
Yeah.
What? So what I find
And all
interesting
the wing
about it.
defenses hang out as the drummers of the
But I
band.
think it's an interesting analogy to the point that there is something deeper that they probably stumbled upon here.
So that model's successful though, like the netball model and what he's talking about. You fit in your role when you have rules for how the team functions, and that's fine. But when we talk about business and being successful, that is counterproductive to fast growth and dealing with unpredictable problems, which is McAllister's argument that the shared consciousness of understanding other people's roles allows you to make decisions faster and for the team to progress based on broader intent and everybody working towards that intent, hence the high-performing thing. Whereas the netball analogy is like, you can only be good within the structure of the team, which is why netball's entertaining, but it's not...
Violent.
It is a little bit violent, but that's not really what we're talking about.
Well, it's interesting, though.
That's why I think it's limiting in the sense that it makes everything too structured to be agile.
Well, what you're saying, I think, and I could be wrong, is that it's a lot easier to get everyone to play netball by the same rules, but it's a lot harder to get companies to play by the same rules, which is the whole point of a free market. The rules in the field change all the time.
Absolutely, yeah.
So maybe that model doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because if you talk about, let's stay on the netball analogy and the comparison to basketball.
Why wouldn't we?
Like,
It's coming back.
well,
You got your bib in your bag?
I never played netball. We used to be in a team.
I did.
The Commonwealth Bank team?
Yeah, nothing but net bank.
It's a great sport. I used to watch my sisters play.
It's a good
I
team name.
split my head open and had to get 15 stitches.
Were you wing defence?
That was the centre, mate. Yeah, pulling the strings.
Yep. Right.
It was
Like-
interesting. They're both really creative people, but they were goalkeepers in goal defence. I put it a line so they couldn't shoot for shit, but still had the height.
Compare that to basketball, though. Basketball, as you said, Tom, there's a lot about power because there's not as much structure, but you also can't innovate as much within the structure of netball. So a lot of people just would have finished with recording this after The Last Dance and the whole Michael Jordan scenario, and they innovated by the way they did the triangle offense, which you can't really do in netball because it's very structured in how you can
surprise people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Did either of you do Belbin?
what's that?
Have you ever done the Belbin test?
No. Did you do it?
Yeah, I did it.
Wait, let's guess what Luke is.
Maybe I need to
I
hear
did
it.
it a long time ago.
I'll summarise. There's plant, which is creative. There's resource
What
investigator.
type of creative, though?
Well, it says unorthodox team member who solves difficult problems.
Break it down by this. Break it down
Oh,
by
you
these
got
three
different?
areas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there's three overarching areas, which is action-orientated roles, people-orientated roles, or thought-orientated roles. There's three under each. So you go action-orientated. You've either got a shaper, which is the person that challenges the team to improve, implementer, puts the ideas into actions, or completer, finisher, ensures thorough, timely completion. People-orientated roles, you got coordinator, acting as the chairperson, a team worker who encourages cooperation, or a resource investigator who explores outside opportunities. And the final one is the thought-orientated roles, which is a plant, which presents new ideas and approaches, monitor, evaluator, analyzes the options, or a specialist, which provides specialized skills.
How boring.
I don't fall asleep. Like actually, obviously obviously I also have health problems. But I did fall asleep. Like, first of all, no one's getting me to do this test.
You don't need to do the test.
Well, maybe now I want to.
Well, if you aligned a Pokemon
do-
to each of them, then you'd probably be more.
We do
more
like
interesting.
tests.
Yeah.
It would make it more interesting, though. That's the point. Anyway.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting divergent question. I think we could do a chat about how if they made it more relatable to millennials, they'd probably produce way more people getting these things. So what are you, mate?
I came out as a plant, which presents new ideas and approaches.
The names don't even match
How
the
could you? That's not
descriptions.
attractive to describe, though.
Yeah.
Like, how did they get people? Did this scale?
There's
Well,
a
the
lot
book-
of people use it.
The
yeah?
book was like the book that he
who's
wrote
an
was
example
quite.
of a company that uses it?
I don't know about companies.
Who uses it then?
Well, I did in my MBA.
Yeah.
Oh, so university uses it.
Yeah.
In an MBA.
Yes.
Right.
Told ya.
That's why it's boring.
What was the interesting thing though is when I did all the research, I
hold
found
on.
it really difficult.
Before we go into
yeah.
that, though, let's just dig ourselves a hole here. What? How did they explain it to you and its benefit when you were on your MBA?
It was all around the team,
Yeah.
the group assignment we were doing.
Yeah.
We did a number of different tests to figure out who each individuals were, so we could then better work as a team, knowing each other's roles.
Did you have little like coloured nameplates to remember everybody's roles?
Well, we did about 4 different tests. That was the part of it.
How
you did
many-
the Myers-Briggs, you did that, you
yeah,
did your
yeah.
Clifton Strengths
So-
Finders. There's too much
All of them
testing.
that don't work.
Yeah, there's too much testing.
All of them that clinical psychiatrists would tell you not to do.
Yes.
Isn't that odd?
It's believable.
Well, what came out? How many people were actually taking the test of what they thought they were rather than who they actually were?
That would be part of it.
Be like, how many do you reckon? Did it create a frictionless assignment?
I can't refer to the Belbin ones, but the Myers-Briggs, the teacher actually did a few experiments where he didn't tell anyone what their results were and then pulled them out of the class and asked them to do an exercise. And it was the stark difference between two people. So they pulled out was the one difference with like judgment or perceiving, which is people that like to make decisions early and plan versus those who like to leave things to the last minute to take in more opportunities. And I was that one, surprising. And then they pulled us out of the class and said, organize your ideal holiday. And the first group was like, where are we going? What are we doing? How are we getting there? Like, did all this. It got down to the point where they planned, okay, we're planning a holiday. We've got to cancel our paper subscription and everything else. Where are we going? I want to go to Paris.
Christ.
Yeah, it was intense. Who's going to look after
Everyone else is like,
who's going to look after
one-way
the
ticket.
dogs? Yeah, and when our group got up there, it
How
was
many
like,
free people in this MBA
Not that that's
What was the
offensive at all.
we're from a financial sector or professional services?
probably about 40%.
And what was the latest night you stayed up with these people to? Was it like 10 p.m.?
Probably about that.
Yeah. Oh, God, it sounds terribly boring.
But then when they pulled up our group was trying to, the ones who don't like to make decisions and try to take in more.
about cancelling their papers. Who's got one? This is the first thing. And, like,
It was this. And
how old are these people? Aren't they like 30?
yes, they're like 30.
How many of them are millennials? What are they doing with the papers?
Oh, they'd all be millennials.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then our group got up there and was like, "Oh, what do you want? Where do you want to go?" And then we all had a vote, and some person wanted to go somewhere with skiing, and someone else wanted to go to the beach, and someone else wanted to go party. They're like, "How about we go to Europe? And how long are we going to go for? Well, how about we just get there, and then we make a decision once we're there around what's the best place, and we don't lock anything in." And
What did
it's
the
just-
plant say?
I don't remember exactly what I contributed. But it was the same as they got.
Not much. It's boring.
Yeah. Well, the same as they got two other groups up. One was they said design your ideal office environment, and one was extroverted, one was introverted, and they're like, "Oh, open plan," and then the introverts like, "Oh, not too open plan. Like, I want to have my quiet spaces." And
I think that's all bullshit. My question though to you is, did you do a project with this structure?
we did a project knowing what people's roles were in a team.
And what happened?
My group had almost all people who like to plan things, and I think we had a lot of implementers, but not a lot of ideas people.
What's the difference between a plan and an ideas person?
No, we had a lot of people who like to implement things, and not a lot of people who like to come up with new ideas.
What the vibe I get from what he built is more that like
So the point though is the issue was we did the testing, so we all knew what each other were.
I sound so arrogant, but it's an MBA. It's a Masters of Administration.
Yeah.
Like, it is literally administrating a company.
Well, this is the problem.
There's not going to be any ideas people in an MBA.
Well, yeah, there is.
How many?
No,
seriously.
68.2.
Yeah.
Like what?
No, I mean it though. Like, there isn't. It's an administrative, non-creative degree.
Well, I would say you're right, but it attracts a lot of people who don't realize that, who are
No,
ideas people.
Maybe people that think they're ideas people.
Well, I'd say it's mixed. I'd say it's too general.
I think there's people that think they're ideas people, but they're just the planner for the ideas person.
Maybe.
Like, they like being on the journey of planning the new idea, but they're
What
not.
about if I said a lot of the ideas people go and then never finish?
Maybe, I don't think so.
I just thought we were making
Because the money's
really
too much.
wide-reaching,
The money's
sweeping
too much.
statements.
It's like ideas people would just be like, I'll turn up to like a traditional person that doesn't give a flying fuck. I'll just turn up to the classes without paying, and I'll just sit there, and no one's gonna work. Like, no one's gonna work it out. We'll talk about Jobs doing it later. Like, he just rolled into university
Yeah, that's
classes
true.
that he didn't
That's
was
true.
allowed to take.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
he just turned up. No one ever told him he couldn't. He's an ideas person.
You know what I think he's done? This is a great framework to run team building activities.
Maybe.
Corporate level team building
Cross-functional
activities.
teams, which we said don't work.
But that is what he's really built.
One I want to highlight is, can you take us through the Shaper one?
Yeah. Oh, you got
Can I just, I'll finish off the point though, was that
Did your team app operate more effectively?
Well,
though
no,
after
this
doing
is the
test?
problem.
Before or after doing the test? Did they do a project before the test and after the test?
we did like small projects and then the whole project. But the problem was we had 5 people on the team. 4 of them were almost exactly the same type of person,
So they
and then
didn't
there
do
was
anything.
me. So they didn't build the team around the ideas of
So
what
why
was
are they making
required.
you do the test then?
Well, so you
Is
could,
this one of the cases of just the people that are running the MBA just doing what the person did last time, but not taking the key learning point away?
No, mate. Don't be flippant. It was in the textbook. They had to do it.
I feel like I feel like no one wrote down what the activity was.
So the shaper is a dynamic
So you're
team
saying that
member.
it didn't get any better after doing the test, but it was better before.
It was good knowing what people's roles were, but then people would sit back and be like, "Oh, well, Luke needs to come up with all the ideas because he's the only one that has any
This is
sort of
what I
ideas
mean.
role." Yeah.
It's the netball analogy. No, I don't score goals. What do you fucking mean?
You don't want to practice shooting?
Yeah.
you know you can still practice shooting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But why? That's not my job. And
Why
here we
does-
are in
why does
2020.
Why does the center have to be 5 foot? It could be 6 foot. You think about if you had a 6 foot person in the middle of the field, it would make a lot of sense.
Oh, man. Shaper. Why'd you pick Shaper?
Maybe read it.
A dynamic team member who loves a challenge and thrives on pressure. This member possesses the drive and courage required to overcome obstacles.
Probably related to our visionary today. But
Super generic.
I think that person isn't just that person by itself. They're never just that person.
I feel like the whole thing just needed one more layer of. It's not just these are the positions. There you go. Solved it. It's like, well, how do you what do you do with that? Like, who's supposed to interact? Like within the people within those. And also, it annoys me that he says a team of 4 is optimal, but there's 9 positions.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They overlap.
Like it's So that's what I mean. It doesn't really go into the detail of how you.
Well, would it work in a non-corporate environment? Or is in a non-corporate environment this shit just happens?
What other environments are there? Well, so I agree with that.
So let's take the army. That's one we know.
So I definitely don't think it would work well in the army.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Maybe fire teams would use it. They sort of do.
No, the whole no.
What I'm saying is they sort of naturally become their role related to who they are a little bit.
So
But they just don't talk about it.
No, so I think people naturally fall into their roles, which is what he observed, but I don't think that structure
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. Here's my question though. Why do people in corporate spend time thinking about this versus that army team that's just naturally falling in, getting shared consciousness like we talked about last week, and just naturally falling into whatever their supplementary task is?
People don't like work.
Well, what's the difference? Could the difference be that you're just outside? I don't know. No, seriously. No, like if you're outside, you think about it, there's significantly other complications. So maybe you just don't focus on internal too much. You constantly focus on external.
Do you think that there's many teams that
Like-
would sit down and actually plan out, I need to hire
What?
9 of these positions? Or to me, it just seems like, as you said, something that you would do in corporate where everyone will sit down and be like, oh yeah, I'll take on this role on the team. And then you spend a day talking about it and then never look at it again.
So I'm going to bring this all the way back. All right, let's say that you're a team that's in an external environment. Sales teams don't do this.
No.
Engineers don't do it when they're building stuff out here. The only people that do this are like internal-facing business units.
Yeah, I was thinking about other external things like
And they seem to be the only people that ever sort of latch
emergency
on to this
services don't really do it.
stuff. Yeah. Everyone that's got outside or making things, I don't reckon does it. I reckon that if you're in an administrative or clerical staff, this is what you use to motivate people to do things.
I was just thinking about the idea of paramedics being like, oh no, I'm only an implementer, whereas I'm the shaper.
Yeah, its application is restrained to internal administrative units, is my reading.
Well, I think that makes sense. So that comes back to the whole point
There
of
might be
structure.
there might be value in that.
Maybe there is value in that.
Maybe this is a way of getting out of horde management.
Well, I was going back to like Jarks' research from the
So
other
we,
week, where it's
we,
like maybe
we
it's part of
establish
the
we've
production
got a
line.
dysfunctional hierarchy. It's very hard to become functional again. Maybe we just need to put the horde in a little bit of a nicer structure.
Maybe it is more just about making people feel like they belong in the team.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like if you
At the
can't- if
individual
you're in a
level.
horde management, you don't have any structure, and you need to get people all the way over there. The difference is with an external sort of facing role, structure will be developed because you get punched so many times, right? By a stimulus you can't control. But in an internal role, you control all of it. So one of the interesting things I find is that is this just a tool to motivate and energize people, and were they aware of that, or were they just sprouting some bullshit theory to make money? I don't
Which
know.
comes back to your first point about Belbin himself and why he would decide as an individual to go down this research path. And maybe it's because he
Well, does it establish
wanted
a
to belong.
hierarchy, or does it just establish overlaying chaos? Because there's other
Well,
people
I
that do
think
that.
it establishes a great way to run university group assignments and get
But-
people thinking about team roles.
They're just not. These assignments, how hard were they to do after they did that? It sounds like it was a pain in the ass.
It was a terrible group assignment.
It's an elaborate analogy to make people think that when you're working with a team, people have different roles. You should pay attention to that.
Yeah.
From an educational point of view.
Yeah, or it's just like another more like let's take the cynical skeptic. It's another way of building control by overlaying people.
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting that there's 9 roles, but 4 people can make a team.
Yeah.
What you're doing then as a manager is overlaying chaos. You know, there's someone that did that. I'm not going to mention them. It's too dark. But people that have always ended up in some form of authoritarian structure generally overlay people's roles. Maybe it's just a nicer way of doing it.
Why do you think...
It's interesting that they study people for so long, though.
Why do you think that more people have adopted this than, say, Jarks' theory of the requisite organisation? I struggle to find any negative research about the Belbin team roles.
Because it's easy.
It's so simple. Like, how complicated was Jarks' stuff?
It's focused on people that would spend time to think about it versus like those other jobs we were just talking about. They've already got different ways of functional hierarchies. You know, there's a sales functional hierarchy. There's an engineer, developer, architect functional hierarchy.
Yeah.
Because they're always shooting arrows or building walls. You know, you're never going to see a construction site do the Belbin test on what roles they're going to do because their trade, their level of experience, and generally their extroversion allows them to build a functional hierarchy, even though it's a casualized workforce, which is pretty interesting when you think about it. Shows how deep and old their work is, though, but the idea of tradesmen is very old.
So if you were a listener to this podcast and you had to structure a team, how would you go about doing it? Would you look at something like this? What's the value in having a test like this or other tests that we discussed on this podcast when you're trying to establish a team?
I think it completely is defined by what you want the team to do. So whenever you want to build a team, you have to go first to outcome type of tasks, and that defines what type of people you need. Because I don't think you need a mix of everyone for the team to be successful at all.
Depends how long you're in charge for.
Unpack that.
Well, if you're like in charge of something for 5 years to 10 years, you should really just help people be comfortable with themselves. So, you know, the complexity of that is that once people work out that they can be evil, they work out that they should be pretty serious in life and not be evil. And that's generally when people work out who they are, so they get more serious. If you're in a short-term environment that's a dysfunctional hierarchy where there's no rules, no culture, no values, and it's highly administrative, then this model might help you breathe sigh of relief to tick off projects that are suitable. They're the only... Yeah, I wouldn't do it if you're in... but I would never be in an environment where I'd be doing that. Yeah. Personally, because it would literally kill me. But if you are, this type of thing can help you create some form of horde energy towards where you need it to go, because you can't establish a structure, or you have to achieve the output, but you don't have any tool of getting there. This could likely help.
So I agree in that if we go back to the sports analogy, when you're learning a sport for the first time, particularly a team sport, the first thing you do is learn your position. So you all get allocated as a kid on the rugby field. You're about that big, you're going to play that role, and you spend time getting good at that role, and then passively learning what the other roles are so you can function well as a team. So if they're teaching this at universities, it makes sense to me that kids that are in undergrad level that are doing management need to learn different roles to understand how teams function, but it's like layer one of how to build productive teams. I think it would be a good structure for that because it's so easy to understand. It makes a lot of logical sense for how people talk to each other, and it's pretty obvious, like it's pretty visible.
So better than doing nothing, but not much better.
Well, I think it's great for undergrads.
It's a short-term task in a dysfunctional bureaucratic role, and it'll help you build some form of stabilization and some form of team culture that could be admired by the other dysfunctional teams. But it is not a substitute for helping people identify what their potential is. It is not a substitute for changing the functional hierarchy that you should be operating in with well-established production lines, processes, talent management. It's not that. And it is definitely not a substitute for you to pick what your fucking career is. Like,
Yeah, it's definitely not that.
all those things, or plan your whole talent management strategy off, or hire anyone off.
I'd argue it's not even great for like if you're trying to improve your workforce.
Or like, this is dangerous. Do not use this to remove people.
Oh no. God, maybe you're right.
All right, final
Surely
que-
you wouldn't do that.
Well, no, people would.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got too many shapers.
Yeah.
No, seriously. Once you start categorizing people, people like to organize, especially if they like being in an administrative hierarchy. They start to organize things, and you go over here. Well, not too many.
Well, final question before we move on to the next part. Do you think it's worth £42 per report?
No.
No. What do you mean? I was looking at your screen. What is that? What's
Is
the
there a
£20 one?
Oh, that's just if you get 200 plus. Just
Oh, you
bulk buy.
It's bulk buying.
£42.
Yeah.
Per
About
test.
$70
How often
per
they change
test.
the test?
Probably never.
I don't. Wow.
All right, let's move on to our interesting, successful individual.
This
And
one's
this is one I've been
serious.
waiting to do for a while. Steve Jobs. Was there anything that you found out interesting about Steve Jobs when you were doing your reading? There's obviously plenty. Anything that you didn't know already?
I didn't find anything that I didn't know. I feel like the most entertaining thing about Jobs is the polarizing fact of it, like the web, how people sit in it. I mean, it was in one of the articles you sent, but it's
Yeah.
like one of the, well, I think it's one of the most known things is people always like either loved him or hated him for different reasons. And I've always found that fascinating because he did some great things, like literally changed how our world functions.
Well, there's very much a lot of people who were like, I didn't like the way he did things, but man, he was successful at it.
Which is annoying. People are too sensitive.
What's that?
People are too sensitive.
I think they're too poorly researched.
I think that is true. I think it's challenging. Like the biography is quite good. Like if you've read the biography,
Walter Isaacson
Yeah,
one?
the Isaacson is quite good. I think the movies, the two different movies, probably changed people's view on Jobs.
He's just a conflicting figure. So everyone thinks that he's a bad leader, but then the most upvoted quotes on LinkedIn are like Steve Jobs quotes.
Well, so here it is. Do you want
Which
to
is
like
just-
him or do you want to like what he did?
Well,
Because the quotes are all about what he did.
a lot of them are not really. A lot of them are strict leadership quotes, like hiring smart people and backing them. Like that's not entirely true. What I don't understand is how people don't connect those dots, which it doesn't make sense to me. That's the thing that always didn't make sense to me was, why is everyone saying he's a bad leader, but then everything everyone talks about is his Stanford commencement speech, which is all about leadership. It's a very, 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 very silly thing. Like, it's the silliest thing that I've seen when it's come to one of the figures that we've discussed.
So wait, what? Maybe this talks to that question. What style of leadership? How would you describe his style of leadership?
I don't know him.
Yeah, I don't know him either.
Well,
But,
it's
like-
it's so misconstrued. So
It's got to be transformational though.
well, see, you've got someone like Bill Campbell, for example, that would say the dude,
Sitting behind, is that what you mean?
saying the dude's brilliant.
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
no, no.
yeah.
No, he wasn't sitting behind. I guarantee that he was probably.
Explain to Bill Campbell is.
Bill Campbell was one of the board directors and is a professional coach. They used to call him the
He's the
trillion
only
dollar
one that
coach.
wanted jobs on the board.
He's the only one that didn't want them to get rid of Jobs in the 90s when they, whenever that was. Yeah, when they moved him. Yeah. So he was the professional executive coach that worked with Jobs and pretty much every other significant entrepreneur of that era.
Yeah, so the most interesting biography to read is Warren. Is it Warren's? What's his name? The dude that works, that's the head of Aspen. Walter Jacobson. What's his name? The Jobs biography.
Oh, the Walter Isaacson.
Isaacson.
Yeah.
That is, and he told him to write all the negative things in there and the positive things in there. And who the fuck does that? Like, first of all, this is the only thing Steve told me to do. Write the positive, write the negative. Let people make their own mind up. The dude's so smart that it's still at that point of success when he's dying. He still understands that he's misunderstood.
Yeah. And doesn't care. Because he
No,
had
no,
a
he
bigger
do-
thing that he wanted to do.
He does care enough to tell the biographer to write the good and the bad. I don't care what you write. Just write it all. That's not a normal person. And if anyone doesn't understand that idea and that way of thinking that far forward, it's insane. And then, like, to step through the journey, right? You step on this book, but you can read other books and you can start to pick a few things together. You start to realize that he's mentoring people like Eric Schmidt and starting like Mark Zuckerberg, and it's all not talked about. And like, it's really, really interesting. It doesn't really pop it up in the book, but you get this kid who's not really understood. His dad's this tradesman who's had the biggest impact on his life, which is where all his design rules come from. Restoring old cars and old things. Learns about taste. Very odd. Then ends up in the same computer after school interest class as Bill Gates. Very odd. Then works out how to sell this telephone thing that's like the first NSA hacking the internet. Does that, sells it. Obviously a bit of an entrepreneur and a hustler. Wants to build and sell things and appreciates taste. Then is ultra successful by motivating a team of smart nerds and getting deals, like doing internships. Who rings up the head of Hewlett Packard, like rings up Packard and Hewlett, like, and asks for an internship and asks for some chips at 14 over the phone. Looks him up in the fucking phone book for Silicon Valley and asks him for it. Like, no one talks about that. Then gets super successful, like $100 million in net worth, real money, by the time he's 24 or 25. Like, what then happens is a child star scenario. I'm $100 million by the time I'm 25. And I know a lot of shit. And he went on this full trip to India that was probably DMT, lost his mind, came back. This dude is the epitome of being the fool before the hero, right? He's not your huge macho brick shithouse type of operator. So no one ever puts him as this sort of hero figure. But then he then rolls in and is building this company, and I would arguably say he's just now, because they made so much money because it was so innovative, right? First mover advantage in the right market at the right time. Did get a lot of it right. Doesn't know how to build a company yet. Doesn't know how people work together. And this is what Bill Campbell talks about. Bill Campbell talks about this guy is so talented, he just needs to learn the management practices. You are making the wrong decision. You just need to teach him the management practices, which is pretty much what he said, and that's all Bill's book really is. So, you know, if you gave him to Andy Grove for a month, you'd probably tell Andy Grove how to improve management practices. That's how smart the guy is. And I hate that everyone thinks he's not smart, which really, and here's how you think he's not smart. He doesn't get the #1 employee card for Apple. He is the founder of Apple, and he doesn't get it. And everyone, like, he goes, so we eventually had to give Steve 0. No, you were wrong not to give the CEO and founder #1. You were just fucking with him, you pricks. You didn't need to do that to him. You just you got sick of being one-upped by someone that was much younger than you, that was much smarter than you. And the reason is these 10 to 15 years of pain, right? He's made all these mistakes, and he's done all of these things. Now, by the time you're 25, if you've already sold 3 products, gone on an Indian trip, joined a cult, which he pretty much did, like, you're not normal, so fucking stop being a dick. So then he gets, and this is where you, I think, which is really completely underestimated. He gets told he's not a good CEO. Leaves. I don't agree with you. Starts other businesses. Has probably a 300-year concept on education. If you haven't seen it, you should watch the video. Tries to do that. Sells it again anyway. Comes back and says, sure, I'll be your CEO, but you're not paying me. Because I care about the 100-year vision that you guys are ruining over this, because I don't believe IBM. And it's simple. I don't believe IBM should control the computer market, because they're going to make it boring, and they're not going to make it available to someone, and they're not going to make it to people that are poor. Right? And you might say this phone's expensive, but a $5,000 computer that IBM was going to charge sitting you at home that was never going to be this innovative is way more expensive, right? And it was all about information processing and education. Right? So he does that. Then he asks for everything. And not only does he takes the whole company back. And I think today he's still the most profitable CEO in history with the strongest share price. What I like about this guy is it is the classic example of how people that are so different are inherently misunderstood. Mm-hmm. And rather than dealing with it, like one of the most interesting things in the book, they call it distortion, Steve's distortion field. So you read this, and the guy that's Walter's pretty smart. You read this book and it goes, Steve's distortion field would say that we wouldn't, told us we're never going to achieve this. The same person's getting interviewed 2 chapters later and they achieved it. They don't connect that this, they wouldn't have achieved it if it wasn't for Steve Jobs.
That's right. Yeah.
They don't connect that the 3 walks that they did around this long park that he made people walk around in a circle was leadership. They don't connect. And what must have been significantly frustrating to this guy was that no one ever understood it, probably other than someone like Larry, old mate, who made him, as one of his best friends, which is really interesting. The other thing is this dude's judged off how he's treated his family. Well, okay, if you're in the limelight since you're 20 and you're having kids young and you have that much power, how many kings and emperors that were that young that had kids treated their first children that well? They were still building it. So you can't equate that. It's one of the byproducts of having that. Could he have been better? Yeah, but he was still learning. You can't learn all those other things and then have everything. You've got to learn things as you go. So my view on the guy is that he is one of the quintessential misunderstood heroes of the modern world. He has a thorough understanding of business and its linking to design, which is probably quite unusual, but connecting that, say, the marketplace to the church, to the school, to home. He had a thorough understanding of how we worked socially.
I like that you talk about him being frustrated, because I think there's something in his own frustration and wanting to find happiness that made him want people to be happy, whereas IBM kind of wanted people to be efficient. And you always describe Jobs as a marketer, and he was a marketer. And I think his ability to make people want to have fun, and I always come back to, iTunes. We talked about it in your HR article last week. What's one thing that makes people happy? Music. How do I give people that on demand in bulk? That is one of the smartest things that came out of his brain. And it was all about happiness.
Well, if you put it really...
Everything. How it looks, how it feels,
if you look at
everything.
how much of a market they took over, and you look at how much Alexander the Great is renowned. And he's a killer, though. Right? Remember, he's a killer.
Different time.
He's got the macho rings. And he's doing Alexander's ring is pretty amazing. Here's an Alexander the Great coat. We don't call it about all the time. It's pretty interesting that this dude is still... People are conflicted about him because I think the evidence is pretty clear. You're talking about someone that, all right, I'm a great marketer, but ended up being a great engineer, effectively a quintessential polymath.
Yeah.
Right? And, the engineers can whinge about it, but did they become great marketers? No, they didn't. So, and that's who you find generally whinge about it. And one of the most interesting things that you see, which must have been significantly frustrating, was when he was doing a conversation on this product and how it was going to change. And this engineer gets up and starts speaking technical specifics. And he literally just sits down and just goes, for fuck's sake. Of course I'm not an engineer. I'm not trying to be an engineer. I'm trying to help people find safety in computers. I'm the translator between the people that don't understand you and what you understand.
It's your job
and if we don't
to
get
solve
it right,
the problem.
The world's going to be built by people like you.
Yeah. And if you can't, someone else will.
That's what I think. How that flicks to the conversation today. You could say he's a plan and a shaper, but the dude is insane. I haven't seen, like, who the hell comes back when they're that rich? Who the hell bets all of their money that after they get all of it and literally loses it all and then takes the company back and takes it back for free? Like,
well, this is one of the questions I've got is, if he didn't get booted out of the company, do you think he would have achieved the things he did?
probably not.
Yeah,
maybe.
Maybe. Do you think he came back more?
Maybe not as big, but I still reckon it would have been huge. So, like, you know what no one talks about? Apple has a 6-person team rule.
Yeah.
Why don't want to talk about that? It's literally a part of the...
well, Belbin would say it should have been a 4-person team.
Well, exactly. But, like, if you think about Elliot Jax, right? It's literally a part of the structure.
Yep.
He's creating a functional management hierarchy that could scale. He built that. There's no way someone else is like, we need a 6-man team rule. Like, his job, and he explains it, he goes from production line to production line his whole week and just listens to it and directs it. That's what Bill Campbell says that he learned to do. But I think he did learn more than that. I think he built the whole thing. And if you want to know how he built the whole thing, he used to ask all these questions around cost of unit and how they used to rebuild all of their factories at cost of unit. And you don't think Musk has taken the same thing and put it over what he did? 100%.
Do you think that was his maturing as he came back the second time? Because everything that I've read, it seems like he made his most successful in little skunk teams when he first started out and managing the teams that he knew how to, as opposed to managing the whole organisation, which he did in the later years.
He's the most successful CEO we've ever seen. Hands down, period, through every stage of the journey.
What about the fact that he didn't replace himself?
How could you... Maybe he wanted to. So
couldn't find someone. I think about this a lot because the company is nowhere near as successful now.
He did replace himself, though. This is where it gets interesting. So if you look at Pixar, he was never CEO there. He was never CEO like Disney. He's never been the CEO of anything other than Apple. He did it at Next and he just didn't like it because it's not his... It's like the Pirates of the Caribbean with the Black Pearl, right? It's not the Black Pearl. But then he built Tim Cook. It's not as successful as Steve Jobs would make it, but it's still highly successful. And if you want to hear someone speak about Steve Jobs, you should listen to Tim Cook speak about Steve Jobs, because that dude got coached by him for like 15 years or something. So the simple idea is that I don't think he was afraid of giving up the reins again. He just had 100 to 200 years that he wanted to achieve.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a different mindset. That's not, and
my question was really like, is it even possible? Like, you can have that length of vision, but like, could you hand it over?
You could probably look at the size of that company and its profitability and go, well, if this is the most successful company, one of the most successful companies, I think the most successful company in history, because it's still maintained its brand image, right? It's still Microsoft doesn't have that same.
What I'm getting at is like, I wonder what we've missed out on since he's gone.
What acquisitions? Has he made?
What vision have we not had?
Like, what acquisitions did he make? You never hear about Apple making big acquisitions, do you? You hear about him launching new products. It's very interesting. So, if you think about that, was it really a normal management hierarchy, or did he take it another layer? And he had these others, like, they would be like CEOs. They're that big. They're that innovative. There's no way. I don't know. Like, I don't think you'll understand how probably good the guy was, and I don't.
No, I just like to think about it. Like,
I think he's also human, right? Which is why Right. So he's superhuman. He makes his mistakes, and it's all in the public life, and you got everyone commenting when. The guy got serious when he worked out he could be evil. And then got very serious and did a lot of stuff.
I think what would be interesting is if he didn't die as young as he did, whether if he would have stepped back earlier and kept in an advisory role, whether Apple would be more successful. Because you think about, he's handed over an organization with billions and billions of dollars of cash, the most innovative products. He had a CEO who he trained for 15 years, and I think everyone would agree that they haven't been anywhere near as successful as they were when he was running it. So if he had a better transition over a longer period of time, would it have been?
I don't know, man, because
don't
I
know
reckon
if
the
you know if
power.
it's successful. Like,
But the power was him being there and saying, no, that thing is not good enough. The color of that thing is not good enough, and pushing at that level. I don't think you can do that as an advisor.
yeah. So your chief dude in design is never going to be the same. It doesn't mean that the guy didn't have his own monetary system. Like, the banks don't work. So I'm establishing my own financial model for the world within my own company. That's how Apple's money works. They loan money to each other so they don't get... Like, that level of... The level of complexity is sheerly insane. And the sustainability that's built around that business...
That's how he
It's-
viewed the
it's-
world, though, right? A utopian view of the world, Jobs.
Well, so what does it matter if Tim Cook gets it wrong for the first 10 years? Is the answer. Like, what? You build an empire, all right? Your empire is, let's take one of the big ones, Roman Empire. How many thousands of years was it?
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
2,000 years?
Something like that. Yeah.
How many shitty emperors were there?
Yeah.
What were the stalwarts that held it together, though? A strong military, the ability to own land, the ability to not be a dictatorship. Anyone could be voted the emperor, right? It's going to be the same thing, which I think is pretty interesting.
It's a fair point. The market still loves the product and the brand, right?
Well, that's what I mean. Like, if everyone wanted to be in the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire had symbols, it had rules, it had values. It doesn't mean that there isn't some smart 28-year-old sitting in one of Apple's back rooms designing something that Apple can sell with the best technology in the industry. And I think that don't equate Jobs' ability to market with Tim Cook's ability to administrate. And don't equate that Jobs isn't smart enough to say to Tim Cook, keep your company alive for 30 years, someone else is going. And that's the level that dude thinks on. But it's also the level that Tim Cook would also think on because he had the ability to think about it. Could he execute it? No. Could he think about it? No. Like different things. You've seen him in movies where it's like, you need to be the king until the son is old enough. Take the son away and make sure he learns how to be Jedi or whatever it is.
It's a good point because the Tim Cooks of the world know their role to play. They're not trying to be Jobs.
And everyone,
They're trying to do that thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
You don't think that dude that created his own monetary system between multiple national economies isn't smart enough to tell to Tim Cook, keep the lights on for 20 to 30 years, don't spend too much cash, someone else is coming?
Yeah, we don't know where they are, but they're going to be there. Yeah.
Or maybe one of his heirs does it.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things is that people in his family with his wife don't necessarily work at the company, which is very strange. I don't know. The guy's an odd dude. I think if it was a different time period with less watching from end to end, every stage of their life, so the ability to pull up every video, he would be looked at it like Benjamin Franklin or something. But because there's too much contextual evidence of someone growing up in the limelight, which they did, him and Bill Gates did, effectively. It means that they look at it like the same thing with Bill Gates right now. He's getting attacked. Yeah. I personally don't like Bill Gates, but he's getting attacked like for something that's ridiculous. One of the things that I think is truly terrifying about this problem, and it might sound like I'm a Jobs lover, but maybe I just like that and misunderstood person that believes in marketing and creating products won over an investment banker, Bezos. He's beaten him still. Yeah. And if you look at Bill Campbell didn't mentor Bezos for longer than fucking 8 months or something.
That's right.
So there you go. But the big thing is, out of it, Jobs is never going to be understood, still understands it, gets a dude to write a book objectively as a one request before he sort of passes away. And I think, I don't know, I think the guy is significantly intelligent, significantly still underestimated, even in his last sort of roles. I don't know.
I think if you're
just pissed a few people off as well.
If you're a Jobs hater,
I don't think he can't.
Yeah, of course he did. He told
And
people
that-
they weren't
and
good
that-
enough.
If you're
and
at
that
the
adds to the narrative.
of course you're going to piss people off if you're building a management hierarchy. People don't like to be managed.
Yeah. I think if you're a Jobs hater and you haven't read Bill Campbell's book, $1 Trillion Coach, it's worth a look. Not because it'll turn you around on Jobs, but someone of Bill's caliber working with Jobs in that way is a testament to what Jobs was probably really like.
All right, let's run through his big 5. Openness to experience.
Like 99.
Can we go?
The guy joined a cult.
Can we go above 100? Like, it's not like
Yeah, he joined a cult and then lived in India for 6 months.
he literally said to people, like, you will have this closed system that you can't play with in your house. Like that's ridiculous.
And just took acid because he thought it'd make his brain better.
I love those videos, those 80s videos of Apple where they're all in like whitewashed jeans, making out on couches, but having a sprint meeting.
That's pretty funny.
Conscientiousness.
Extremely high.
Yeah.
98, 99.
Yeah, incredibly high.
I didn't stop.
Extroversion.
Extremely high.
Yeah.
He took everyone attacking him personally. I can tell you right now.
Agreeableness.
I reckon he started super low, but I reckon by the time he finished up, he's probably around 15%.
Which is pretty much what we know from the research with maturing with
I think
age.
that was
But
probably the one thing he changed,
yeah.
other than neuroticism.
Well, then I think the last one's probably the most interesting, neuroticism.
Well, I would have said it went the other way.
It's quite high. Well, I don't know, man. Like, it's a hard thing to... Jobs at the end of his life was probably the average sort of neuroticism of a CEO because he worked out that the ability to design and build things was separate to his temperament. Whereas most people, when you first start out, they think the ability to design things is related to your temperament. Like, oh, I do my best work at night. No, you don't. Do your best work at night. Your brain's been working for 12 hours. Get up early and do it. Change your temperament.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
So for me, it's like...
I would have thought he
5
was
to 10%.
more emotive when he was young, and then he learnt how controlling that a bit made him better.
Well, I think he had to regulate his temperament so people didn't have any way to tarnish him as a CEO. But I don't think that happened till the last sort of 25% of his job. Like the last 25% of his life.
I think his level of understanding of people suggested his
He had no
neuroticism is...
neuroticism in the... He had pretty low neuroticism in his Stanford speech.
Yeah,
in his
yeah.
last few engagements, you can tell. So I don't know.
So do you think he has high neuroticism but learned how to regulate it?
No, I think he has had high neuroticism, and then it probably decreased as he got older and left the business and was on those final years.
Yeah, but it would have been all the way to the end.
So I don't know. He probably ended up in the 20s, but he probably started in the
I'd say it's
70s.
20s.
Yeah.
Call it 30%.
I think his neuroticism was high because even to the end, he still couldn't understand why people gave him grief. Like, why do you not still understand me? I've done all of these things. Why aren't you listening? He's pretty interesting. If you want to, one of the most interesting stories I've seen about him is how he only really sat down with Obama once and then just said no. Why? He's the only one that did it because he was like, well, if you think about it, he's one of the longest CEOs ever. So he's been a CEO since he's 20 to like 50, 60, right? You're like 30, 40 years, right? The same job. Remember I said like you get better if you're just the same CEO on the same job. How many times do you reckon he's engaged the government? How many times have we had? Oh, look, they're invited us to this. It means everything's going to change. We can change the world. And he still went and saw that president and was like, fucking, we need to change this. Nah, same shit, I'm out. Like, he still tries to change them and realizes, nah, this presidency's not going to go too well. Which we're slowly seeing unravel.
One of the things I love about Jobs is he just kept doing the one thing. Like he was on that vision. He could see that 100-year vision, and that's what he wanted to do. It didn't have to evolve into politics or...
If you put
like
Jobs within a Belbin team structure, he tried to solve another huge problem was next. But then he realized that I'm better off taking my ideas, getting the right administrators, operators, and designers, coach them in the stages that I overcome, and let them solve their own problems. Like Pixar's a really good example. And then, the rest of Apple's acquisition was just getting really smart people around data, which they were missing. So if you look at how it was like data or like hardware components. So they would buy companies that knew data and knew hardware components, and I don't even know if they've seen the value in it yet, but
And they're still one of those companies that is so focused on the customer and the values of their customer to this day, even without jobs. Even everything like their data security policy, how they look after everything, it's not a money grab.
The interesting thing about this company versus other companies is that it's the idea of what the company's trying to achieve, not the one product that scales. So there hasn't been many value companies that have got 100 to 200 year vision. So like the 100-year vision could be summed up as, we want to create great products for people, and if it's great, they'll buy it. If it's not great, then they won't. But we'll just create another one after that then it's great, which is pretty interesting. Like that's like a whole change. It's not like say Salesforce. It's like, we want to be the customer relationship management system for the next 50 years. It's like, we want to create products. That idea is huge. That's like that idea is as simple as when.
And the idea as well, that if they're not great, we'll just create another one.
Well,
because how many flops do they have?
Google was like, it's a search company. It's an ad tech company. You go to Apple, it's like, well, there's still the idea there that you could create something that isn't the next phone. It's just the next thing.
Yeah.
That idea is probably the biggest achievement that he's probably had, because that disrupts the whole idea of a company. Because generally the way a company is built is around a service or a product that then the company scales.
Yeah, you become the best at that thing and then hold on to it.
Everyone in the market's a consumer. Consumers change. We've just got to be the best at producing the next product.
No one at Nokia was thinking about making an iTunes
No, they're
store.
a phone company.
Exactly.
No one at Apple's, have you noticed, Apple's hardly ever described as a tech company. Even when they describe the tech companies, they tried, like Apple for some reason doesn't get described as the tech company. Like Microsoft will get described as a tech company, or Salesforce will get described as a tech company, or Facebook described as a tech company. But Apple, it's sort of just like, even if you see where it sits, like it's even way further down than everyone else.
Yeah.
Like it's got its own, like it's very, very interesting. The bit that I find is that this guy probably significantly thought about things more than everyone else. But I'd still say by the end of it, he was pretty frustrated.
I agree. Deep thinkers are.
Well, fuck. It's like the artist frustration. Sometimes you don't get big until you're dead. His problem is he's not even getting big. You don't go into an MBA, right, and learn about product management by Steve Jobs, do you?
Well, I haven't. No.
That's what I mean. That's insane. Like, marketing by Steve Jobs. Never heard of it.
They don't know how to teach it.
Correct. But it's like, it's not that hard to teach it. You know, but no one then leaves Apple and then teaches it either. It's not scaling. You don't even know what he did. And I don't think it's that hard to understand. I just think that this whole public life image of this guy and people misunderstanding him but seeing him grow up on stage, like whoever gets filmed for 40 years as a CEO on stage, right? And everyone just forgets. I think it's a huge brain drain problem, because if you've got CEOs that don't want to have a 200-year vision, it's not a happy place. It's the same as like you see a lot of people hit Musk, right? He's got a big vision for the right reasons. He's got multiple companies trying to achieve certain things. If you look at the core of each of the companies, though, it's all about energy. And energy is required for adventure. So sustenance is required to run to the next mountain. And he's looped those two things together. The first person to comment on Virgin's thing not thing was him.
Yeah.
We could keep going. It was a few times for us. Like, that's pretty interesting. You know, he's the same sort of guy that's going to have the same sort of thing. They're never going to, back to the point we're talking about today. They're never going to look at the management science that those guys applied.
No.
In categorical detail, because they don't believe that they were good managers and administrators, which I think is hugely underwhelming. If you saw them do this test, they could probably do any of the roles on Belbin's test at any part of the organization.
Minute by minute.
Correct.
Yeah.
And could easily adjust. And you could say, well, how do you sum up that? Let's say I'm in Belbin's test. Musk is sleeping on the production line floor, jumping into the production line. Jobs did the same thing.
Yeah.
He jumped into meeting on meeting on meeting on meeting on meeting.
Yeah.
So.
Don't see Bezos running around.
It's hard to see sometimes the king on the front line filling sandbags, mate.
Bezos isn't building anything.
Doesn't need to.
Yeah.
He's administrating.
All right, fellas, leave it there.
Yeah, good session.
Thumbs up. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.